I want to recognize Mrs. Miller Meeks of Iowa now. 5 minutes, ma'am. Is Ms. Miller Meeks on? Okay. Mr. Owens of Utah. Mr. Owens of Utah. Mr. Good of Virginia.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Third time's a charm here. Glad to be with you all.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you to our guest today. It's sad to see, though, Democrats once again framing every issue in terms of race, seeking to further divide our nation, perpetuate a false narrative, and further portray a victimhood mentality. Democrats also never miss an opportunity to put illegal aliens and foreign workers ahead of Americans. If they truly wanted to protect foreign guest workers, they would support the work of Border Patrol and Customs and Border Protection. I have been to the border and I've heard the reports of physical abuse and danger for those illegally crossing. Those who can't afford to pay smugglers are extorted into carrying drugs and other illicit material. Others are abused as indentured servants of the cartels. If they make it across, many are forced to live the rest of their lives with existential threats to themselves and their families. While Democrats will romanticize illegal immigration, demonize law enforcement, and turn a blind eye to the horrific abuse that people face at the hands of the cartels, my questions are, how long will it be until the president, the vice president visit the border? When will Democrats stop attacking Border Patrol, ICE, and local law enforcement? And if Democrats are truly worried about exploitation of guest workers, will they support mandatory E-Verify? Turning specifically to agriculture concerns and my questions for our witnesses, I have, as somebody asked earlier of another member on our panel, I have worked on farms. I worked on dairy farms, horse farms, agriculture farms, picking crops, baling hay, and much more. It is very hard work, but there's honor in that work. I now have the honor of representing Virginia's 5th District that has over 300,000 farm workers. Recent years have been difficult for farmers, thanks in part to China's trade war and the mishandling of COVID-19. But only Democrats could look at a struggling industry and think now is the time for more costly and burdensome regulations, as they believe more government is the answer to everything. So, Mr. DeCamp, can you please comment further on the economic impact for farmers if Democrats force H.R. 1080 upon them, the Fairness for Farm Workers Act?
I don't know that I have much to add beyond what I said before, which is that it creates pressure on farmers to either reduce hours for workers in order to avoid having to pay an overtime premium, or it forces them to absorb a higher cost structure, which threatens their viability and threatens to increase prices substantially in the market and puts them at a competitive disadvantage with foreign producers. It's tough, and for businesses that are barely making it, especially smaller farms, it can be the final nail in the coffin.
Yeah, don't you think there's a disconnect in the Democrat policy of requiring overtime pay in agriculture to the realities of what farm work is like?
I think that farm work, much like many other jobs in the Fair Labor Standards Act for which overtime is not provided, is such that it is not susceptible to the policies of the FLSA. It doesn't make sense, in other words, to apply the overtime premium to this kind of work, much like many other kinds of work that are exempt under the FLSA.
Can you point to any examples of similar policies that have been acted in other states that, outside of Virginia, that have hurt the ag economy?
I'm not familiar with the much state law regulation of agriculture.
If producers are forced to grow less labor-intensive crops because of this change that's been proposed, how do you think the food supply might be negatively impacted?
The question would be, would those same food products come from somewhere? And if they came from somewhere else, would that necessarily involve a higher cost to consumers? And then I'd also be wondering about if the farmers are using less labor-intensive crops, what are the farm workers doing? Are they going to have jobs? Does that affect employment for those workers in the industry if the farmers are saying, we're just not going to plant those crops?
And undoubtedly, that would hurt the wallets of consumers, as prices might go up with more scarcity of products because they're not grown, because labor is shifted to less labor-intensive products that are grown. Again, to the panelists, to our guests, and to my fellow members of this committee, it's a shame that we think that the majority here at least thinks that government's the answer to everything, more government intrusion, more government regulation, instead of letting the free economy work. And we want to layer more levels of regulation,
Thank you,
intrusion
sir.
upon these farms.
Gentleman's out of time.
I think